My guest on the dojo today is somebody who's a key member of the retro gaming, preservation, and Shenmue communities. He part-owns a company that sells limited amounts of games and are often the only physical items produced for these titles. Not only that, he is a massive Shenmue fan and brought to market the Shenmue 3 Day 1 Collector's Edition with the Dreamcast case, has brought to market the Shenmue 3 Complete Edition and the Shenmue music sets, LP and CDs. My guest today is Shenmue fan and limited run games owner Josh Fairhurst. So Josh, welcome to the dojo on this fine Friday evening or afternoon where you are. How's it going?
It's going great. Super happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join me. I know you guys at Limited Run are absolutely swamped with stuff, so thank you. It's much appreciated. So I'm going to dive straight in. I do this with everybody. I'd like you to sort of give me an overview of what got you into gaming and your gaming history from when you were growing up to the present day.
Sure. So, I started playing games, I'd say when I was 3. I think it was about the age when we got a Nintendo at my house. We actually tricked my mom into buying it for my dad. We claimed it was for his birthday. But it was really me, my brother, and my sister trying to get it for ourselves. And, my dad had liked Atari, but he wasn't really like super into it. But we managed to convince my mom. I guess we put on a very convincing show. And sure enough, the Nintendo was way too complicated for my dad, and he never played it. But that really started a lifelong love of games for me. And from there, I played the Nintendo for about, I'd say like 7 or 8 years. And then my grandparents got me and my brother a Sega Genesis for Christmas. And at that point, that's when I became a Sega kid for, my brother, he saved money. He bought a Super Nintendo, but he'd never let me play it. So, he didn't have any level of control over the Genesis because that was bought for both of us. So, I really got into Sonic. I got into Streets of Rage, Eternal Champions, the Comic Zone, Vector Man. Like, those are all the games I played. I had a free trial of Sega Channel for a while. So,
Oh, nice.
there were a few months where I was just kind of glued to that, playing anything I could through there. So I'm still a big fan of Pulse Man, which only ever came out on that. That was a pre-Pokemon game from Game Freak that only ever came out on Sega Channel, and it's great. If you've never played it, you should check it out. After that, I was kind of on the Genesis until till the Dreamcast, really, until 1999. I sold a bunch of Beanie Babies to get the money to buy a Dreamcast, and I went to the store. I pre-ordered it. I think I got Blue Stinger, Power Stone, and Sonic Adventure on release day. And there's this thing where the first game you buy with your own hard-earned money, it just kind of ends up having a special place in your heart. And Dreamcast was that for me because I really appreciated the value of that console because I bought it myself and I really played the hell out of it, knowing that I had bought it myself and I was invested in it and I loved it. And I started reading the official Dreamcast magazine and getting really more into Sega at that point. Kind of retroactively got a Saturn by trading somebody in my neighborhood Pokemon cards for it. I'm just like full in on Sega at that point, and maintained that until I was still playing my Dreamcast probably until like 2005 when I got an Xbox 360.
Oh, wow.
I guess I played a lot of GameCube because I was playing Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2 and some of the other like Dreamcast stuff that ended up getting ported over there. Same thing with Xbox, but while I was in high school around that time, I kind of just I was really focused on some specific games, Sega stuff or some kind of similar things. Like I'd occasionally play some RPGs, but I was mostly focused on school. And then when the Xbox 360 came out, I kind of got really deep back into playing everything. So I think on Xbox 360, I managed to get like 110,000 gamer score or whatever.
Oh, wow.
And because I was just playing so much at that point when I was in college and after, and I kind of like really dove back into the idea of wanting to make games, which was something that as a kid I was also interested in because I never had a very good computer. I had a really garbage Tandy computer that had BASIC on it, and I could play games off of like a big 5.5-inch floppy disk, something, these things were like 15 years out of date at that point. Or I could make my own stuff in BASIC. So I learned how to program so I could kind of make games and, play something new to some extent. And I got out of that, I'd say, once I realized, I wasn't very good at programming graphics. So I probably did it for about 3 years. But when I was in high school and college, I really got back into this, I want to make games. So I started learning Unreal. I started taking courses on programming, and in college, I focused on that. So by the time I got out of college, I kind of really felt like diving into it full time, and I started my own game studio. Forgot to mention when I was in college, I worked at Epic Games as a game tester on Gears of War 2, and I kind of got a taste of working on AAA, and it was a really stressful experience because I was a full-time student in college, and I was doing, full course load, but then I was also doing 90-hour weeks at Epic. While we were crunching on the game, it was just kind of nonstop, and there was a lot of personal stuff that happened in that period that was just kind of insane. My brother almost died. He was in a car. The guy driving it was drunk, and my brother almost died. My mom went into the hospital because she was sick and eventually died from that. And it's just this thing where I wasn't home. I wasn't there to be with them, and I was like, I don't think I can do AAA crunch, and that really pushed me to start my own thing after college. So I did that. I started Mighty Rabbit Studios to make games for myself. We released a game called Saturday Morning RPG on mobile, and it reviewed well, and it kind of gained a cult following to some extent, but it wasn't a big financial hit. So my company kind of had to seek work elsewhere, and we got hired to make this game called Breach and Clear. We basically decided to build it for like a shoestring budget, and we had no stake in the revenue on it. So if it was successful, we didn't really get anything from that, but we needed the work. We built it. It was successful. It made our partner several $1 million, I think, and they brought us back to do a sequel. And the issue with that one ended up being that we had 3 partners on it, 3 publishers that we had to kind of individually please on it. And they all wanted different games. So we ended up having to build basically 3 games in one to appease everyone. And this was a huge undertaking for a team of 11 people. So we kind of ended that development in a weird spot. Like the game surprisingly reviewed decent for how crazy the development was and for how kind of ridiculous we had to make the design to appease everyone. It's kind of a miracle that it's as playable and decent as it is. It didn't really make a lot of money, and it wasn't the standard that any of these publishers wanted. Like I think we were reviewed around like a high 60, low 70 on Metacritic. Like not bad when you think about shoestring budget, 11 people, and we had to put 3 games in one. And just to describe it, it was an open world tactical game that you can play either as a turn-based game where you have control over the flow of time, or as a real-time action game. And it's open world with a 40-hour single player storyline, like a full loot system, like procedurally generated dungeons, like online drop in drop out multiplayer. Like every single feature that could be thought of had to go into this thing because all our publishers wanted different things. And it's just like shocking that it turned out as decently as it did. But it wasn't a huge hit, so we didn't have any work after that, and we were about to close. And I kind of made this decision to throw all of our last remaining money into taking one of the games that we'd made, that Breach and Clear game. They had kind of thrown us a bone and given us Vita rights. They were like, yeah, we don't really care about Vita. You can port it to Vita and do whatever you want there. So that was kind of like the last thing we did. And I made this decision like, hey, if we're going to go out of business, I want this thing we made to be preserved physically so that people know we were here. They know we did something, because when you look at like physical games, there's not really a lot of forgotten games that have come out physically. Like game collectors keep these things alive. They trade them around, they talk about them, they revisit them on YouTube years later. But I don't think this is going to happen with digital games. I think, if a game never comes out digitally, eventually it's just going to end up completely forgotten in a way that like games from the 80s and 90s don't end up. I made this decision, this last money we had would be put into taking Breach and Clear on the Vita and making it physical. And, everything at the time said this would be a really stupid idea. It was like, the Vita was basically dead at this point. 2015, it had been out for, I think, like 2 years. But AAA people had all but abandoned it. And physical was another thing everyone was saying was dead. They were like, digital's the future. So it seemed like a really unwise decision from every angle you looked at it. But I decided to do it just kind of hoping that, there were other people like me that liked collecting games that would want this, and that, you know, there were other people that were maybe frustrated about digital games kind of taking over physical.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
sure enough, there were enough people out there that wanted this, that when we put the game up for sale, me and my friend from childhood, Douglas Bogart, actually joined the company when I started it as my co-founder to help me kind of get everything off the ground and market and do everything he could to kind of get the word out about it. So, we worked together to ensure that this first release was a success, and it sold out in under 2 hours, which was kind of astounding. And it was like instantly validating that, like, yeah, there's a big audience for this. This is a good idea. And from there, it's just kind of been a whirlwind where we have released over 1,000 different things physically in the last 5 years, which is insane.
Crazy to think you've been going 5-ish years, and that's what, basically 200 releases a year.
Yeah, it's
That's
nuts. And
insane.
and I've been able to work on things that have been kind of near and dear to me since I was a kid, like Star Wars, getting to work on Sega stuff like Panzer Dragoon, Shenmue, Space Channel 5, like Streets of Rage. These things are all crazy. Like if I went back in time and told kid me what I was doing, I don't think I would believe myself.
No, and I'm slightly jealous you're working on all those Sega titles, and one of those obviously is Shenmue itself. So let's go back a little bit. When did you first come across Shenmue itself, and what drew you to it?
So I saw Shenmue in the Dreamcast magazine because I was a big fan of that magazine. I bought that first preview issue that they put out, and then I kind of subscribed immediately after that because I loved it. And they would focus on Shenmue because it was this beautiful looking game. It was cutting edge. It was very different than everything at the time. And I think in one of the early demo discs, they actually like included like a real time video talking about what full reactive eyes entertainment was, and it just drew me in because there was nothing like it at the time. Grand Theft Auto hadn't been out. Like the concept of a game where you kind of live in this world that was this immersive just didn't exist. So it was super appealing. And also, as somebody who had just kind of recently discovered like anime and really gotten into Japanese culture at the time, like the idea of being able to kind of live inside of this like period piece of Japan, like this small slice of Japan, like it just felt so appealing and alluring to me at the time. So I kind of made it a point to follow that game. And I think there are only two times in my life where I've ever traded in my games to afford another game. Like, I hated selling my games. I still do, and I still regret it so much that I can still like think back to this. But I actually had to trade in games to get Shenmue, but I knew it would be worth it. I mean, I've subsequently gone back and like rebought those, and I'm pretty sure some of the games I traded in were my brother's, and he didn't know it. But
Great.
I distinctly remember trading in like Toy Commander and some other stuff for Dreamcast that like I've gone back and reacquired those, but it still stands out to me as like I was so drawn to Shenmue that I kind of went against my own personal principles to get it because I was like, I gotta have this game. I need it.
That's commitment. That's definitely commitment to the cause to get hold of Shenmue. And I mean, you've got going back years now. Do you remember what you first did when you popped it in that Dreamcast and actually it fired up for the first time? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I mean, I watched that attract mode video. Shenhua standing on the rock with the hawk or falcon or whatever flying by, and I was just like amazed by it because it looked so realistic, and there was nothing. Like, again, it's just like it's hard to put this into context. I don't think I have to do this for any listeners here. Like, I'm sure everyone that listens to this, kind of had the same experience. But there's like at the time there was nothing like this. Like, there weren't games that were set in like a realistic, like almost modern day setting at the time. Like, there's nothing like that. So it just really just blew my mind to see something like this rendered in a game. It felt like something that was more that I would see in a movie.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. And when you think about the setting, and then you add in the music, you add in the story, you add in all of it together, and it's this package in back in 1999, 2000, where I don't know, it was groundbreaking. There was nothing like it. I would argue, and someone will probably correct me, a gaming historian, that I'd argue it's probably the first proper, true sort of AAA title that we now sort of see and take for granted almost. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'd say that. I mean, I don't. At least in my mind, having been a Sega fan, like almost everything that I was playing up to that point was an arcade conversion, and I loved them. But they were simpler games, not necessarily in terms of like the difficulty of the play, but you weren't progressing like a very advanced or complicated narrative of any sort. You were kind of just playing to get better at the game, and Shenmue kind of um, it was one of my first experiences where it was like a game where your primary motive to get through it wasn't to get better, it wasn't to get more points, it was to learn more about the story.
Yeah, definitely. And the story in Shenmue is a big epic story. So talking about obviously Shenmue 2 as well. Obviously you played Shenmue 1, you finish it. Did you import Shenmue 2 for Dreamcast, or did you have to wait?
Yeah, so I mean, I the minute I finished Shenmue 1, I remember going online and looking up details on Shenmue 2, and I was super happy to see that like details were kind of already out there about it, and I was excited to get it. I don't remember if it had already come out in Japan at the time, but I decided to wait because I wanted the US version, and then the disappointing news came through that the Dreamcast version wasn't coming here. So I kind of longingly eyed a UK import that was being sold at a store near me for a very long time, but I never had the money to buy it. So I ended up having to wait for the Xbox release, and then I played it there. But what's weird is the copy that I was like staring at longingly for months. I ended up finding it at a game store used, like in the mid 2000s, like 2007, I think. There was a game store called Play and Trade, and they had that exact copy that I was staring at in 2000, just sitting there. Like somebody, whoever had bought it, that wasn't me, had traded it in, and it came back to me. So I still have that. I picked that up, and it's been a part of my collection for the last 14 years. And it's like, it's weird that it came back. It was like destiny.
Fate right there. So all right then, put you on the spot a little bit. Out of the first two original Shenmue games, which is your favorite?
I like the first one just because I've played it more than I've played the second. So I played through the first one probably like 4 times because I played it a second time while I was waiting for the second game to come out, and then I played it again at some point in the mid thousands when I was just trying to, I just got back into it, and I didn't get back to Shenmue 2 again until the HD version came out. And when that came out, I played Shenmue 1 and 2 back to back. I like Shenmue 2 a lot because the scope is so much bigger and there's so much that you can do in it. There's so much story development and characterization, but there's something about how small Dobuita is versus Hong Kong. Like Kowloon's just so huge that it just doesn't feel as focused. There's something about this like small area where there's so much detail, there's so much life, and that's not to say that detail's not there in Shenmue 2. It's still there in astounding amounts, but Shenmue 1's just special in this way to me.
Very good. I mean, Shenmue 1 feels like you're at home. It's like you say, it's that very small world where everything's intricate. It's all very nice and detailed, and you can pick things up, and it feels lived in. I think that's the way it will go with Hong Kong, as you say. The scope is massive, and it makes you feel
Yeah.
lost, which I think is part of what they wanted to do.
And that kind of, that's kind of my feeling on Shenmue 3 as well, where like, you get out of Bailu into Niaowu, and it's like, they're night and day. Bailu's so much more kind of contained, I think. And then Niaowu is just like huge. It's like it was overwhelming when I got there.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it was. I mean, Bailu. I love Bailu Village. It's one of my favorite areas. But I think because it feels like home, that's the only way I can describe it. Niaowu is, as you say, is much larger. So Shenmue 3, obviously, when you finished Shenmue 2, you weren't anticipating a nigh on 15-year wait for Shenmue 3 to get announced. Where were you? Did you see the forklift tweet from Yu Suzuki when it was finally announced?
I saw the forklift tweet, I think, and so I was actually flying to E3 when it was announced. I was on the plane when it was announced, so I had seen the forklift tweet. I'm like, okay, this is just I was jaded after so long, where I was just like, there's no way that anything's
Yeah, yeah.
happening. I was like, this can't be real. I'm not going to get my hopes up. But then the plane lands and my texts start coming through, and all of my employees who know I'm a huge Shenmue fan, they're just like saying, "Did you see this? Shenmue 3 was announced." And I was like, "You're screwing with me. You're messing with me. You're not. This isn't real." And then I looked it up, and I was just like, I probably did something really embarrassing, like jumping up in excitement on the plane or something. I'm sure I did something really embarrassing on the plane, but I was so excited about it. I immediately went and backed it for several $100s, and it was
Yeah,
amazing.
the game they said would never happen, I think, and it did. So, sort of fast forwarding a bit, obviously you get Shenmue 3 in your hand. What are your thoughts on Shenmue 3 now you've played it and sort of had time to digest it?
I really liked it. So I know it's polarizing, but I
Yeah.
feel like the general I feel like the general response from people who really like the first two games is that they still really liked the third one. And I think it's a lot of people who maybe kind of had these expectations that the third game would modernize it, that like kind of ended up let down because it really didn't modernize anything, right?
No,
Like
it didn't.
it 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 really felt like it was a game that was developed back then, but it has much better graphics.
Yeah.
And that was fine to me. Like it was exactly what I expected. Um, so I didn't end up disappointed by it at all. I really enjoyed it, and I felt like some of the criticisms weren't necessarily like good faith. A lot of people complained that there was a lack of story progression, but I feel like that's false. There's a lot of stuff you learn about, a lot of uh, stuff in the past that happened with Rio's dad and Londi's dad as well. That kind of like pieces together a lot of this backstory that kind of fills in blanks on learning these characters' motivations. And if you actually like spend the time to listen to Shenhua when she's talking to you, I think every evening, you learn a lot of stuff about her. There's a ton of characterization that I think is very important because Shenmue is as much about these like small characterizations and these small moments as it is about the grand scheme stuff, where it's like what makes that game special is that everybody feels like a real part of the world. Like everything feels like it's supposed to be there. Like nothing feels like an afterthought.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. And the Shenhua conversations are, well, I'd argue some of the best conversations across the entire three games. Actually, I think
Hmm.
the detail they bring Shenhua to life. They make you feel part of her story, part of her backstory, and actually, you get to know Rio a bit more as well. He opens
Yeah.
up. He laughs. He gives I know he gives himself away a little bit more, which I think was the focus of Shenmue 3, was to give him a bit more character because he's quite deadpan, isn't he? Generally,
Yeah, he's just kind of stoic. And even in the first game when you interact with your friends, it's never like it never feels it never feels like they're very good friends or whatever, even though they're supposed to be. Like the story tells you they are, but like his interactions are so robotic with them. So it was kind of nice to see in Shenmue 3 that you kind of got that side of him where you hear stories about his past as well with his friends when he's talking to her, and it just makes him feel like more of a real person. Um, the only complaint I had with Shenmue 3 was just, not getting all of the original voice actors back. And a lot of fan mods have kind of fixed that, but I'd love to see that stuff reintegrated into the game. Like Paul Lucas not being Lon D was a huge disappointment to me. Like it felt like it deflated this huge moment. You spend 3 games, 2 decades waiting to see Lon D again, and when you roll up to him, he sounds like Snidely Whiplash from Rocky and Bullwinkle. Like he's got this like nasally voice instead of this deep menacing voice that you remember from the first game, and it just deflates that moment. Like that's the one thing that I disliked about it. It was like, I could take or leave the phone conversations not having the original voice actors. They're all optional, but Lon D was such an important element, Because the last time you see him in Shenmue 2, he's just flying away on a helicopter. He says nothing to you. So it's like, this is the first time you hear this guy speak in 3 games. And to kind of have his voice change as much as it did was just a big
Yeah, I
disappointment.
think that was echoed across the community as a whole. Actually, I interviewed Bill Black, who did the recordings for it, and I know he's quite openly said that if he'd have had more time to sort of research and get into the Shenmue world, then he would have probably considered some of his options again. It's probably as fair to say. So I think he's aware of the criticism. As you say, there's fan mods out there now. Obviously, Eric Kalso's come back and done all the Ren lines. We've got Paul Lucas has come back and done the Landee lines, which is really good as well. So there's the option there now for the community on PC at least, which is something. But it was a shock. The Landee voice more than Ren for me, anyway. I don't know if you felt that way.
Yeah, the Ren voice was kind of it was same. I felt the new voice actor was still pretty on par with what you would expect from Ren, but Lon D just felt like this big shift because he had such a deep, menacing presence in the first game that I don't know. I like it. I can hear his voice in the first game just in my mind. Like, yeah, that probably is because I've watched that opening sequence of Shenmue so many times. But like, there's this expectation that's ingrained into how he should sound, and it just didn't live up to that, which was sad. And like, I kind of I read up on all the kind of reasoning where it was, the voice acting was recorded, in Japan for the first 2 games. I think the English voice acting was done in Japan, so it's like, it wasn't convenient to where they were recording 3. So a lot of these people were kind of, remote or whatever. So it's fair. And I certainly don't feel like it detracted from the game overall, because I still really loved it. And I finished the game and just I felt so good about it, and also pretty sad because it kind of felt like, I with all the criticism that the community was leveraging at it for, whatever reason, Epic Game Store or, whatever other things, I kind of felt like, is this going to be it for Shenmue? Like, I really want more. I want to see what happens next. And I got nervous at that point because of the way the community was responding to it. I was like, am I alone in my opinion that this was a good
I
game?
would say not. I think with anything, it's quite easy to be negative, especially with social media, as I'm sure you've seen across many games, across many years. But actually, if you look at the community response as a whole, it is generally favourable. But I don't think people were loud enough about that. If that's my personal thought on it, yes, it does have its flaws. Shenmue 3, absolutely. But I mean, it was developed in a very different context to the original games back in the day, and the fact it even exists is a well, it's a miracle in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was a game, as I said before, it's a game that never should have happened, really, and the community brought it back. And I mean, obviously you don't have to like everything, of course you don't, but it's a little sad that I think some people were quite vocal in their displeasure at some aspects of it, that it detracted from actually what the game did quite well. We are where we are, and hopefully we get to Shenmue 4. And on that topic with Shenmue 4, what are your hopes for a 4th game should it come along?
I mean, I just, I'm interested in seeing what this treasure is now that, they're off to find at the end of the 3rd game. Like, it's another cliffhanger. So it's like, I'm here waiting to see what
Oh
happens
yes,
next. And, I kind of consumed that Shenmue Online trailer from years ago where it was like, all this magic happening. And it's like, I want to know what's up with this magic. Like, what are all these like fireballs people were doing in that trailer? Like, is this stuff that's going to show up? Like, those are things I'm kind of interested in seeing, and it does feel like it's kind of moving more in, I don't want to say like a supernatural direction, but like it's certainly moving in a direction where it feels like, the 4th game might, bring some of that stuff in.
it could do, couldn't it? And it's sort of hinted at with Shenhua when she interrogates Yang Lang, the Mongolian wrestler, with her. You don't quite ever know, find out what she does to him, but she does something, and it's implied around her powers. And she talks about in her dreams that she almost feels alive in certain villages, that she's lived countless lives, etc., through her ancestors. So I think you're right. I think it is going that way. And my view of that Shenmue Online trailer, there's certainly some canon in there, not necessarily all of it, but I would be surprised if we didn't see a good portion of that trailer in a fourth or fifth game. And one example is the scroll you get from LDR. That's in that online trailer.
Yeah, it feels like, it's very clear that Suzuki, had a plan with this game and the series and the story, and it was very well mapped out, because when you go back and look at stuff, even that earliest Project Berkeley trailer, it's like there are elements in this thing that 3 decades later are still in the game. Like, with Shenmue 3, I was amazed to see that, hey, there had been concept art of some of these new characters circulating online, back in the early thousands, and they were just kind of ignored. Nobody knew who the character was yet, but this character showed up very faithfully in Shenmue 3, and it's like there's something reassuring about knowing that there was always a plan, and it I think it helps lend to make this a better series. It just feels so meticulously planned.
It does. So, all right, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit again. Obviously, we don't know what the status of Shenmue 4 is at the moment, and we had to bring Shenmue back from the dead, for want of a better expression. Do you think Shenmue 4 should be the last game in the series and finish it off?
I don't know. I don't. So the thing is, I don't want Yu Suzuki to have to compromise in his vision, because there's something really calming about the pace of Shenmue, right? Just being able to take your time and take it easy and really absorb the ambience of wherever you are. And I feel like if it's like, oh, there's a chance for a fourth game, and they have to kind of rush through resolving the story, it's not going to be the way that it's supposed to. So I'm kind of conflicted, because I want, a resolution. I don't want something to happen to Yusan where he gets sick and dies, and then we never get a fifth installment. But on the other hand, it's like, what if he can complete his vision as it was planned? Because I think, if I recall, when Shenmue 2 moved to Xbox, I remember there being some post, probably on Shenmue Dojo, because I used to go there all the time, where he was like Shane Black or somebody from Xbox had talked to Yu Suzuki and said that there was going to be 5 Shenmue games. So at this point, we're so close to that 5th one, getting to where it needed to be fully resolved the way that it was supposed to, that it's like, I don't really want to see him compromise. I kind of just want to, gamble and see this thing through the way that it's supposed to be seen through.
I can see exactly where you're coming from, and I know there was some elements of the community, or certainly wider press, that were arguing, you've brought this game back from the dead, it should be finished in 3, but I think you'd lose so much. We don't know half of what's going on in that Project Berkeley trailer. Are we going to see the train? Are we going to see the temple? There's so much that's unresolved. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it could be done in one game, and I'd rather it was done in his vision, what he wants, than it was compromised and it wasn't quite... It was good, but wasn't where it could have been, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like I don't want to be rushing between set pieces or whatever. And like Shenmue, one of the things that's great about it is, the games don't do these, like, they don't fade to black and go 5 years later or whatever. You're kind of going through things in real time, and I feel that's very important to the series and the appeal. And if he was forced to kind of cut things down and he had to jump between these different moments or sequences, like, you're going to have things like that where time just kind of progresses when the screen fades out or whatever, and you miss key details, you miss things that should have been there. And I'm not looking for that kind of experience from Shenmue. I'm looking for something that puts me in the world and makes me feel like I am Ryo and I am on this quest to avenge my father.
Lovely, thank you for that. And the next sort of point, I suppose, around Shenmue and the franchise is the anime. Obviously, we have, at the time of this being recorded, there's a panel next week at New York Comic Con. I mean, what are your hopes for the anime and what it can do, not just for the franchise, but also in terms of what you expect to see from the anime itself?
I mean, I'm hoping that the anime is a chance to get more people into the franchise and just get more fans. I feel like if younger people get into Shenmue through that, they'll play the games, they'll get into it, and it will, my hope is, generate enough interest again to, give the 4th game a shot. That's kind of my long-term goal. And, if not that, at least, if the anime is good and can make it to this point, I've always said, when it seemed like Shenmue 3 was unlikely, like, I was like, I'd read this in book form. If that's the way I have to get the story, I would be more than happy with that. So, if there's some outlet, some media type that can finish this story or advance it, I'm going to be happy with that. So my overall hope with Shenmue 4, or not Shenmue 4, the anime, is that it leads to Shenmue 4. Realistic view is, if Shenmue 4 can't happen, at least the anime is there to progress the story.
Yeah, and I think in some respects it's a smart move, isn't it? Because you've got, hopefully, best case scenario, as you say, it brings in a lot of new fans. They play the games, they get on board, and Shenmue 4 all of a sudden becomes that much more viable to a audience that they can actually really go for it. And if it doesn't, and the anime is still successful, then we hopefully get a story resolution, which I think that's what we're all craving. I'd love it in game form, and if you had to hold me to my word, I want it in game form, but I will take it anyway. I can get it at the end of the day.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which we will see. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we get some real good news on the anime this time next week. So we'll see. But your obviously passion for Shenmue sort of come into your work as well. You've released the Shenmue 3 Collector's Edition when the original release came out. You've got the complete edition on the way. You've also been involved in the LP sets, the CD sets. Can you talk me through how that all started from an initial idea to pitching it to getting it to market?
So we had approached, so I actually made it a point to approach Deep Silver when I kind of learned that they were publishing the game. I found a way to send them an email and, ask like, hey, do you have a collector's edition for Shenmue 3 coming out? Because if you don't, I feel like that's going to be a wasted opportunity because, Shenmue fans love the series. They're going to want to be able to get a box that has more than just the game, because I'm speaking from personal experience on that. I'm like, I want to spend more to get a better box for this game. And I also really selfishly wanted to do a Phoenix and Dragon Mirror replica. And the surprising response they gave back to me was that they were doing one, but they were only going to do it in Europe.
Yeah.
So I was able to convince them, like, hey, let us do it in the US. I'll prepay you for all the units. I'll take all the risk. So I kind of took all the risk to make that US version of the collector's edition happen. And I also kind of put my own spin on it by adding this Shenmue 3 mock Dreamcast case in it, which I worked with Sega USA to make happen. And they were super confused about this idea. They were like, what do you mean it's an empty Dreamcast case? Who would want that? So I had to really sell this idea, but once they got it, they got it. And I was super happy to be able to do that. Everything else in the collector's edition was kind of predefined, preset, done by Deep Silver. Mm-hmm. So I didn't get to do my dream, which was, full size Phoenix and Dragon Mirror replicas, but maybe at some point I'll get to do that. Still didn't really get to do it with the complete edition, but that was a really cool thing. It kind of blew my mind when they said okay to letting us do it, because we got to be involved with my favorite game of all time. My two favorite games of all time are Phantasy Star Online and Shenmue. So that was a huge deal to be able to get to do something with that series. And at the following E3, I got to meet Yu Suzuki, which was amazing. I think I probably embarrassed myself by just kind of espousing my love for him and his games and Shenmue. But it was just incredible to be able to work on it. And then when I finally played Shenmue 3, I finished it and I was like, I really like this game. I hope I have more opportunities to work on Shenmue stuff again. Mm-hmm. And after all the DLC came out, I kind of realized that I could tell from the trophy earning statistics that nobody was buying the DLC. Nobody was playing it. And I was like, oh, that's not a good sign. So I reached out to Deep Silver and I was like, hey, I just played all this DLC and I actually really enjoyed it, even though some of it was kind of weird. Like the battle race one, it was weird, but it was fun. Like it felt like an arcade game. Like it was cool.
Great.
So I was like, I actually really enjoyed this DLC and I really enjoyed the game itself. I'd love to make a complete edition, because I feel like that's something that would appeal to our fans, where, they could get a game and all the DLC on the disc, because I don't think you're planning to do one of those. And I'd also like to have an opportunity to include some items that I thought were cool from the game. And they agreed to letting us try it. and we had some weird restrictions, like we couldn't sell the complete edition, just game by itself, which was something I wanted to do, but there were too many copies of the standard DLC free version out on retail, and they didn't want to, invalidate that version. So, we had to sell it as a collector's edition. Um, and that's what we ended up doing. And, we're kind of still stuck in a weird state on that because it's been interesting to get the game disc approved with Sony. It's just been this kind of almost nightmare scenario where, at first we were like, oh, the content's too big for the disc, which, we were like, we'll do 2 discs, that's fine. But then it's this really complicated, weird situation. But I think we have it figured out now, finally. Everything with the actual physical goods is kind of finished and waiting to come over from China. So it was an interesting experience overall, and I'm glad to have been able to do more for Shenmue because, my ultimate goal with all of these products was like, I wanted to show that there was more demand for Shenmue and do literally everything I could on my side to try to make a case for Shenmue 4, because I don't want to be sitting somewhere like 10 years down the line going like, I should have done more to make Shenmue 4 a thing. Like I wanted to know, like, I used the tools that I had to make it get done by, doing this vinyl soundtrack release, doing this complete edition, figuring out ways that I could make a revenue case for Shenmue 4 to exist. And yeah, I feel like I did an okay job, but I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go because ultimately I'm not on that end of the spectrum. I'm basically just the guy that makes stuff. I just kind of hope at some point something happens.
Very good stuff. So the LP set before, again, did that come around in discussions with making the complete edition, or was it a separate idea?
So we hired a Japanese business development guy to kind of start our Japanese wing, a guy named Alexander Anile, and he had a record label called Brave Wave, and they had kind of already been in discussions to do something for Shenmue 3. So when we brought him on, I was like, progress these conversations because I really want to make this happen. And he was very adamant on doing just a 2-disc selected thing, kind of like Data Disc did. But I was like, you know what? Like, to be honest, I love the Data Disc release, but there's a lot of tracks that I love in the game that are not on those.
Yep, true.
Like, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, I know there is literally hundreds of tracks of music in each game, but each song can mean something different to somebody else. Like, one person could be obsessed with the song from Bob's Pizza or whatever, and they are. If you look on YouTube, that song has hundreds of thousands of views, and it's like, nobody outside of somebody in the Shenmue community would ever like say like, hey, let's put Bob's Pizza on the vinyl, but that's a song that means something to someone. So I'm like, who am I to say that this random song that plays in a random shop in Yaowu won't be a song that somebody really loves? So I was like, let's dive in fully and do like a 13 LP set where we literally have everything. And there was kind of a side benefit of it where, when we were mastering these tracks for WiseNet, the tracks like they were this mix of like new tracks that were made for Shenmue 3 and then like old tracks that had been recorded back in the thousands for kind of the original either Shenmue 1, Shenmue 2, or this kind of original attempt at Shenmue 3. And all these things needed to be remastered to be brought in line with each other. So we did that, and like in the process of doing that, we made all these tracks like fully usable again. So like they don't have to ever bother with that expense in the future if they, do get to come back to Shenmue. Like that was kind of a thing that like, Alex told me like, hey, if they remaster these things, they'll be available for them to use again. And I was like, okay, that's another way I can help to try to make Shenmue 4 a thing. It's a small thing, that's a minor expense in the grand scheme of things, but it's something, whatever I can do to remove barriers. Cause, as a fan, I just want Shenmue 4 to happen.
Yeah, definitely.
But my big ask with the soundtrack, going back to the Bob's Pizza thing was, the song that gets stuck in my head from Shenmue, and that's in literally every Shenmue game, is the Tomato Convenience Store song. And it's like, I looked it up and I was like, why has this never been on any piece of physical Shenmue soundtrack like released? Like, it wasn't on any of the CDs, it wasn't on any of the vinyl. Like there was no way to get that song in a physical form. And I'm like, outside of the theme song for Shenmue, that's like the only song that's in all 3 games. It's like a constant element of the series. It's like it's there, and it's not. It's like you can't easily listen to it outside of YouTube. So I was like, this song has to go on, both the 2 LP, and it's got to be in the 13 disc set. I mean, obviously it would be because that's every song in the game, but I made it a point. I was like, you can pick any other songs you want for the curated 2 LP, but Tomato Convenience Store's theme has to be there. That's my mandate.
Brilliant. And I know, actually, I saw some people on Twitter when you announced it were asking, is Tomato going to be on there? Is it going to be on there? And you're like, yes, it will be. Oh dear, brilliant! I love that, and I love the passion behind it as well, because it's coming from a fan at the end of the day, and it shows. And I know that you've got you had John Lillerman do a piece of writing for one of the inserts, which I've seen already, because I know some of them are starting to make their way into consumers' hands, which I thought was really nice. And I'm sure others that you can't talk about to come through, aren't there?
Yeah, and we actually, I made it a point to kind of go back to the original concept artist for the series as well. So I got,
Yes.
Alex went to Wisenet, and they said, "Hey, can you get us in touch with him?" And that happened, and we were able to get him to do a new piece, which I thought was really cool. It was, people outside of the community, they looked at the piece and they're like, "This doesn't look, I don't understand why they're using this as the cover." But everybody in the community got it. They were like, "This is important. This is very authentic."
Yeah, absolutely, and it's part of it. It's part of Shenmue, and the fact that it was the original artist. I don't know. It just appealed to the community and that community spirit at the end of the day, and I think that's why it was so popular. It's one of my favorite designs. Actually, I love it. It's really, really good. So again, it comes from a place of passion. So I'm gonna be cheeky and ask this. Obviously, they're being prepped or they're in manufacturing. When do you think all of this will be ready to be shipped? I know you've had a lot of problems with China getting stuff over, etc.
Yeah, I'm really, so the vinyl set should hopefully be ready soon. It's just, international shipping right now, just getting things over. So the vinyl sets are produced, I think, in the Czech Republic. So we have to kind of wait for a freight out of the Czech Republic that like can actually kind of get these things over, because they're very heavy, they're very large.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping we'll be able to have that 13 disc set soon. As far as I'm aware, I believe those are complete, as are the kind of individual volumes. Because we did offer it, we had the 13 disc set, we had the Bailu volume, the Niaowu volume, and then we had the 2 LPs. So 2 LPs are already over. They're small, they're light, so those came first, and then I'm hoping the bigger sets arrive within the next few weeks. That's my hope. The complete edition box set, the collector's edition, I'm hoping that's soon. It's just been crazy to get that through, and shipping out of China has been so unpredictable, where it's like, we can have collector's edition complete manufacturing, and then it will just have to sit in the warehouse for 5 to 6 months just to find a shipping container and a shipping boat to come over on. So it's been kind of impossible to predict. It's been, that's been the big nightmare situation for me over the last 2 years. Like I kind of lose sleep over these kind of delays that are happening that are completely out of our control just because of the global state of shipping. But I'm hoping things get better. I'm hoping we get them in soon. The thing is, I know it'll be worth the wait. I know people are going to be happy with it. And there's, at least, in my mind, I feel like I put some good nods to the elements in Shenmue 3 that were special to me. The Sword of Seven Stars that we're doing, the little replica of that, I thought was really cool. And the Bailu-chan
On the
and
Chobu-chan, yeah. Oh, they're brilliant. I love
Chobu-chan,
those.
yeah. Getting the little rubber figures of them it's great. They're just like, they're not necessarily appealing to anybody who didn't play the game, but to anybody who played the game, they're, kind of the perfect items to include. So I'm excited for those to come over, and I think people are going to be happy to get them.
I can't wait. I must confess, I've been looking forward to it ever since I ordered it. So when they come through, I'll be waiting with anticipation for those to turn up on my doorstep in the UK. And I'm happy. The wait's the wait, because I know for a fact, having bought other stuff from you guys, that it's always top notch. So I have no concerns. And thank you for the update on that, because I know it is difficult with shipping and COVID and everything else, and the community will be keen to know what's going on. So that's really good to get some clarity on that. So I'm just aware of the time actually as well. So I'll go into my sort of final two questions. Have you got any more ideas for sort of Shenmue inspired products that you'd like to do, or in potentially in discussions about that you can't talk about too much?
I'm not in discussions for anything right now. There's literally nothing that's happening as far as Shenmue stuff with us at this point. But as a fan, I'm loaded with ideas and stuff that I want. My favorite strategy guide of all time is the strategy guide for the first Shenmue game, because there's like 10 pages that is just filled with bios on these like insignificant side characters. It's like, oh, there's a person that's just kind of walking on the street, and you may never talk to this person, but they have a bio in this strategy guide that you can learn about. Like, hey, that guy you kicked on the motorcycle, he's got a birthday and a name and a twin brother. Like, there's just something really cool about all these details about these characters that you would otherwise miss. And, so like a dream of mine would be to do a strategy guide for Shenmue 3, at the same level of detail. And we have gotten into strategy guides recently. So, that's something that I'm always thinking about, but, I realize the amount of work that would be. And I'd also need to get full approval from everybody involved with it. And, just kind of pipe dream things that I'd love to see, like, a replica of Rio's notebook.
Yeah.
Like it print all this stuff inside. Like, it's totally useless as an actual notebook because he's got all his notes inside. But there'd just be something cool about having that. And then kind of the holy grail for me is, full size replicas of the mirrors.
Oh, please do it.
I mean, I feel like everyone wants those. Like, that's kind of like a universal thing in the Shenmue community. We all want these, like, I don't even know how to describe their size, but they're bigger than CDs. They're big circle plate things. So I want to make that happen, because the one that we shipped with that first collector's edition is so tiny. It's it's like Oreo sized almost, very small.
Yeah, it is. But if you do full size mirrors, put me down for one or both straight away.
Hopefully, and really weird idea. I don't think anybody else would really want this, but I love the little cassettes in the game that you collect. How
yeah.
Every song has a little single. There's just a single cassette for that song. Like, it would be neat to me to have replicas of all of those. I don't think anybody else would care, but I would compulsively buy 35 cassette tapes that look like the ones from Shenmue.
Well, why not? Why not? And I mean, personally, I'd love a Shenmue 1 and 2 collector's edition, similar to what you've done with Shenmue 3. I'd love one of those. And I know the community have been sort of throwing that idea around. I'd love one, a proper Shenmue 1 and 2 collector's edition to go with the re-releases would be brilliant.
Yeah, my big pie in the sky wish list thing that I'd love to do, but I'll never be able to get Sega on board is, finally give Shenmue 2 a US Dreamcast release.
Oh.
So that's kind of like, that's my ultimate pie in the sky thing, because, we managed to convince Konami to let us do Rondo of Blood on Turbo Duo in the US as an official thing. So it's like, it's a pipe dream. I don't think I'm ever going to convince Sega to do it, but, crazy things have happened with Konami. So, maybe one day I could make that happen. And, in that case, I'd get to do, a nice collector's edition too. And eventually something for the first game as well would be amazing. So, because I think as far as collector's editions go, we got a version of Shenmue that came with like the jazz club soundtrack or the jukebox soundtrack or something, that was the best we got, but there could have been, something much cooler.
Yeah, and we didn't even get that in the UK. Actually, we just got the standard PAL release, which it's fine. I've picked up the jukebox etc. since, and I know the PlayStation and Xbox release, there was a Japanese collector's edition with the Shenmue 2 soundtrack on it, which was really nice. But again, I don't know. I want a full collector's, like the mirrors, and my head's spinning with things in Shenmue we could put in toy capsules. You name it. There's so much there, isn't there?
Shenmue chocolate bar.
Oh yeah, and the crisps.
Yeah. Yep. People would be like, why are these in here? But the fans would get it.
Yeah, we'd get it. and buy it all. I'm sure. Okay, my final question, because I'm aware of your time and you're a very busy man, obviously, is do you have a message for the Shenmue community to sign us off?
I mean, just keep up hope for the fourth game, and never give up on supporting Shenmue, because I think someday we might be able to make that fourth game happen. I don't, again, I have no relation to it. I'm doing absolutely nothing for Shenmue, but I just like to keep up the hope that we can make it happen, because after Shenmue 3 happened, and I never thought it would, who knows? Who knows? Shenmue 4 could happen. I was gonna say like a quote from the game, but then I was like, that'd be corny, so I'm not gonna do that. Just,
Why not?
keep friends, those you love, close to you always.
Yeah.
Something like that. But I felt better to just kind of rally everybody, because I really want to see a Shenmue 4 happen, and I know everybody in the community does as well. But I don't want anybody feeling kind of disheartened the way that I did when I saw that kind of mainstream response to Shenmue 3. I think there's still a path if we can all collectively support building to that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And on that sort of note, for anybody who is listening, new to the community or is coming back, don't ever forget, on the 4th of every month we tweet hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4, because we want our voices heard to get that fourth game. And to sign us off, I'd just like to say thank you to you, Josh, for taking the time out of your day to join me. It's been a great hour to have you on the show. I look forward to getting the limited run collector's edition and LP set from you guys when they turn up. And thank you for all your work behind the scenes in getting these products to the fans and making those happen.
Thank you for having me. It's been, making this stuff is my pleasure. I love stuff, so what I do isn't work to me. Most of the time it's me just trying to make things that I want for myself happen. That's the case with Shenmue. I just really wanted something to happen there so I could own it myself. So, doing this it's a bit selfish in a way, but I'm glad that there's other people that want this stuff that I want.